Most people believe evil looks obvious. They imagine a cold stare, a loud voice, or someone openly cruel. But real evil rarely introduces itself that way. It smiles. It agrees with you. It compliments you. It earns your trust before it quietly begins taking pieces of your peace, your confidence, and your identity. And the terrifying part is that by the time most people realize what they are dealing with, the damage has already been done. Marcus Aurelius once reminded himself that every day he would meet people who were selfish, dishonest, jealous, and manipulative. Not because the world was cursed, but because human nature contains both virtue and vice. The Stoic does not fear this reality. The Stoic prepares for it. Today, you will discover 5 signs that reveal you may be dealing with an evil person. These are not dramatic movie villains. These are the people who slowly poison relationships, destroy confidence, manipulate emotions, and leave others questioning themselves. Some may be strangers, some may be co-workers, some may even be family. And one of these signs is so subtle that most intelligent people completely miss it until it is too late. Stay with me, because the 5th sign may completely change how you judge the people around you for the rest of your life. Imagine a young businessman named Daniel. He was respected, successful, and genuinely kind. His friends admired him because he always believed the best in others. He trusted quickly, forgave easily, and assumed everyone shared the same values he did. Then someone entered his life who seemed perfect. Charming, supportive, generous, and incredibly attentive. Daniel felt lucky to know this person. Months passed and strange things started happening. His confidence disappeared. Decisions that once felt simple became exhausting. He apologized constantly, even when he had done nothing wrong. He felt guilty for saying no. He questioned his own memory. Friends noticed he smiled less. His family said he seemed different. Yet Daniel couldn't explain why. Nothing obvious had happened. No screaming, no violence, no dramatic betrayal. Just hundreds of tiny moments that slowly changed who he was. That is how darkness often works. It doesn't always attack. Sometimes it erodes. Like water slowly carving through stone, it changes you so gradually that you barely notice until one day you wake up and realize you are no longer yourself. The Stoics understood something modern psychology is only beginning to explain. The greatest threats to your peace rarely come from events. They come from people who influence your mind. Epictetus believed no one could truly harm your character without your permission. Yet he also warned that we become like the company we keep. Every conversation, every friendship, every relationship either strengthens your soul or weakens it. That is why learning to recognize dangerous people isn't about judging others. It is about protecting your own inner world. Because once your mind is conquered, everything else follows. And the first sign is one almost everyone mistakes for confidence. An evil person enjoys controlling your emotions. Notice I didn't say influencing. Everyone influences emotions. A loving parent comforts. A good friend inspires. A wise mentor challenges. That is healthy influence. Control is different. Control means another person learns exactly which emotional buttons to press so they can decide how you feel. One day they praise you, making you feel unstoppable. The next day they ignore you, leaving you desperate for approval. One week they tell you you're special. The next week they make you feel worthless. This constant emotional instability isn't accidental. It's strategic. Seneca warned that the person who cannot govern themselves seeks power over others, because controlling another person's emotions creates an illusion of superiority. Think about that. Healthy people want peace. Broken people often want power. Imagine someone who always knows exactly when to withdraw affection, just enough to make you chase them. Someone who creates unnecessary drama whenever life becomes peaceful. Someone who starts arguments before important moments in your life, stealing your focus and confidence. After enough time, you stop living according to your own emotions. You begin living according to theirs. Your happiness depends on whether they are pleased. Your confidence depends on whether they approve. Your peace depends on whether they decide to leave you alone today. Without realizing it, you've handed them control over something that should never belong to another human being. Marcus Aurelius wrote that your mind belongs to you unless you surrender it. That sentence alone can change a life, because the evil person doesn't need chains. They only need your emotional dependence. Modern psychology calls this emotional conditioning. The Stoics simply called it slavery. Real freedom begins the moment you stop allowing someone else's mood to dictate your own. Notice how emotionally powerful people remain calm around chaos, not because they never feel emotion, because they refuse to outsource their emotional state. They don't beg for validation. They don't chase approval. They don't panic when someone withdraws affection. Their center remains within themselves. That kind of stability terrifies manipulative people, because once they lose control over your emotions, they lose their greatest weapon. But the second sign is even more dangerous because it attacks something deeper than your feelings. It attacks your perception of reality. Picture a woman named Emily. Every time she remembered an argument, her partner insisted it never happened. When promises were broken, he claimed she misunderstood. When she confronted obvious lies, he accused her of being overly sensitive. At first, Emily thought maybe she really was forgetting things. Then she began writing conversations down. She discovered something disturbing. Her memory wasn't failing. Someone was deliberately trying to replace it. This is one of the oldest forms of manipulation in human history. If someone can make you distrust your own mind, they no longer need to convince you of anything. You'll convince yourself. An evil person constantly makes you question your own reality, not because they're confused, because confusion gives them power. Epictetus believed our perception creates our experience. Corrupt the perception, and you corrupt the person. Imagine trying to walk through a forest while someone secretly rotates your compass every few minutes. Eventually, you stop trusting the compass. Soon you stop trusting yourself. Eventually you simply follow the other person wherever they lead. That is exactly how psychological manipulation works. The frightening part is that intelligent people often become its biggest victims. Why? Because intelligent people naturally question themselves. They assume they might have overlooked something. Manipulators exploit that humility. Every conversation becomes exhausting. Every disagreement leaves you apologizing. Every conflict somehow becomes your fault, even when undeniable evidence exists. The Stoics encouraged relentless self-reflection, but they never encouraged self-destruction. There is a massive difference between examining yourself honestly and accepting blame for someone else's behavior. Wisdom asks difficult questions. Manipulation supplies false answers. One helps you grow. The other slowly erases who you are. Pay attention to how you feel after spending time with someone. Do you feel clearer, stronger, calmer, and more confident? Or do you feel confused, guilty, anxious, and mentally exhausted? Your nervous system often notices danger long before your conscious mind does. Seneca once observed that some people infect the soul just as disease infects the body. Not through violence, through constant exposure. Imagine carrying a backpack. One stone feels insignificant, another seems manageable, then another, then another. Eventually, you're carrying hundreds of pounds without realizing how heavy you've become. Manipulation works exactly the same way. One tiny lie, one unnecessary criticism, one subtle insult disguised as humor, one moment of guilt, one small betrayal. Individually, they seem harmless. Together, they become unbearable. Most victims don't collapse because of one terrible event. They collapse beneath thousands of invisible ones. And here's the tragedy. Many never recognize what happened. They simply conclude they have become weak. But they were never weak. They were slowly conditioned to distrust their own strength. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily to return to reason. Reason becomes impossible when another person constantly rewrites reality, which brings us to the third sign. Ironically, it often looks like kindness at first, and once you understand it, you'll never view certain relationships the same way again. What makes the third sign so dangerous is that almost nobody recognizes it in the beginning. In fact, many people mistake it for love, friendship, loyalty, or generosity. They feel grateful instead of cautious. They feel chosen instead of trapped. By the time they finally understand what has happened, they have become emotionally dependent on the very person who has been quietly draining their strength. An evil person wants you to depend on them instead of developing yourself. Think carefully about the people in your life. Who celebrates your independence, who encourages your confidence, who wants you to become so capable that one day you no longer need their approval. Healthy people are not threatened by your growth. Manipulative people are, because your independence is their greatest loss of control. Seneca believed that true friendship creates freedom. It never creates chains. A real friend teaches you how to stand on your own feet. A wise mentor hopes you eventually surpass them. A loving partner wants you to become stronger, not smaller. But someone driven by darkness often behaves differently. They offer help you never asked for. They solve problems you were capable of solving yourself. They constantly remind you of everything they have done for you. Every favor becomes a debt. Every gift becomes leverage. Every act of kindness quietly transforms into a contract that only they can see. At first, it feels comforting. Then it becomes expected. Finally, it becomes required. Without noticing, you begin asking permission before making decisions you once made confidently. You begin doubting yourself whenever they are unavailable. You begin believing you cannot succeed without their advice. This is no longer support. It is psychological dependence. Imagine a bird raised inside a beautiful golden cage. It receives food every day. It feels protected from danger. It never has to struggle. Years later, someone opens the cage door. The bird refuses to leave, not because it cannot fly, because it has forgotten that it can. This is exactly what manipulative people attempt to create. Not prisoners with locked doors, prisoners with invisible beliefs. Marcus Aurelius constantly reminded himself that external things should never own the soul. Wealth, status, praise, relationships, even comfort could disappear overnight. Therefore, the Stoic trained himself to depend only on his character. An evil person reverses this principle. They slowly convince you that your peace comes from them, your confidence comes from them, your success comes from them, your happiness comes from them. And once you believe that they no longer need to threaten you, fear does the work for them. Fear of losing them, fear of disappointing them, fear of being alone. Fear becomes the invisible prison. Modern psychology describes this as emotional dependency, but the Stoics understood the same truth thousands of years ago. Anything you cannot live without eventually controls you. That sentence deserves to be remembered. Anything you cannot live without eventually controls you. This doesn't only apply to people, it applies to money, status, attention, comfort, approval, pleasure. The Stoic path has never been about rejecting relationships. It is about refusing to lose yourself inside them. Ask yourself a simple question. If this person disappeared tomorrow, would I still know who I am? If the answer frightens you, then your identity may already be resting in someone else's hands. And that is exactly where darkness wants it. But there is another sign that is even more revealing. Unlike the previous ones, this one appears whenever someone else begins succeeding, and it exposes the true condition of a person's soul. An evil person secretly resents goodness in others. Notice, I didn't say they dislike evil. Many people openly condemn bad behavior. That is easy. The real test comes when someone else shines, when another person succeeds, when another person becomes happy, when another person finds peace. A noble soul feels inspired. A corrupt soul feels threatened. Imagine two co-workers. One receives a promotion after years of hard work. The first co-worker congratulates them sincerely. The second smiles while quietly searching for flaws. They probably got lucky. They must know someone. They don't deserve it. It won't last. These words may seem harmless, but they reveal something profound. The conversation was never about the successful person. It was about the speaker. Envy has always been one of the oldest enemies of wisdom. Epictetus taught that comparing yourself to others guarantees suffering because your peace becomes dependent upon circumstances you cannot control. Yet someone consumed by darkness cannot celebrate another person's victory because every success reminds them of their own emptiness. Instead of becoming better, they try to make others smaller. Instead of climbing the mountain, they throw stones at those already climbing. Look closely at history. The people remembered for changing the world were almost always criticized by those who accomplished very little. Criticism is cheap. Creation is expensive. Destruction requires almost no effort. Building character takes a lifetime. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire, yet spent countless hours reminding himself never to become arrogant. He understood that another person's excellence never diminishes your own. There is enough room in this world for countless people to succeed. Scarcity exists in fearful minds. Abundance exists in disciplined ones. Now imagine sharing exciting news with someone. Perhaps you finally achieved a personal goal. Maybe you started a business. Maybe you improved your health. Maybe you found someone who truly values you. How does that person respond? Do their eyes genuinely light up? Do they encourage you to continue, or do they immediately redirect the conversation toward themselves? Do they minimize your accomplishment? Do they warn you that it probably won't work? Do they subtly drain the excitement from your victory? Pay attention. People reveal themselves most clearly during someone else's happiness. A manipulative person cannot tolerate seeing you become more confident because confidence weakens their influence. They cannot tolerate your growth because growth makes you harder to control. That is why they often disguise jealousy as concern. I'm just trying to protect you. I don't want you getting hurt. I think you're aiming too high. It sounds caring. Sometimes it even sounds loving. But beneath the surface lies fear. Not fear for you. Fear of losing influence over you. Seneca warned that many people wear masks so convincing they eventually fool themselves. The most dangerous deception is the one performed with a smile. There is another reason this sign matters. Energy spreads. Spend enough time around grateful people, and gratitude becomes natural. Spend enough time around bitter people, and bitterness begins feeling normal. Human beings unconsciously mirror the emotional habits of those closest to them. This is why the Stoics placed enormous importance on choosing companions wisely. Your future often resembles the emotional atmosphere you repeatedly enter. Imagine sitting beside a fire every evening. Eventually, your clothes begin smelling like smoke. Spend years surrounded by resentment, and eventually your own thinking begins carrying the same scent. Without realizing it, you start criticizing more, complaining more, distrusting more, judging more. Not because that is who you truly are, because influence works quietly. The soul absorbs its environment just as the lungs absorb air. Ask yourself another difficult question. When I leave certain people, do I become a better version of myself or a smaller one? Your answer may reveal relationships you have ignored for years. And now we arrive at the fourth sign, perhaps the most heartbreaking one of all, because it often hides behind intelligence, charm, and even apparent kindness. Yet once you see it, you will never unsee it. The fourth sign has destroyed countless families, friendships, businesses, and marriages throughout history. It is also the sign Marcus Aurelius repeatedly warned himself never to develop. And once you understand, why, you will begin noticing it almost everywhere. The fourth sign is this: an evil person feels no genuine remorse after causing harm. They may apologize. They may cry. They may promise to change. They may even convince everyone around them that they are the victim. But pay attention to what happens after the apology. Do their actions change, or does the same cycle quietly begin again? Marcus Aurelius believed that every human being makes mistakes. The difference between a virtuous person and a corrupt one is not perfection. It is the willingness to recognize wrongdoing and become better because of it. A wise person feels the weight of their actions. An evil person feels only the inconvenience of being caught. That distinction changes everything. Think about someone who repeatedly lies. Every time they are confronted, they offer the perfect explanation. Every excuse sounds believable. Every apology sounds sincere. For a few days, everything seems peaceful. Then, without warning, the same behavior returns, again and again and again. Eventually, you realize something painful. You were never listening to repentance. You were listening to strategy. Real remorse produces transformation. False remorse produces temporary performance. Seneca wrote that character is revealed through repeated actions, not beautiful words. Words can be rehearsed. Character cannot. Imagine touching a hot stove. You burn your hand once and immediately learn not to repeat the mistake. Now imagine someone who keeps placing their hand on the stove over and over, while insisting they have learned their lesson. Eventually you stop believing the promise. Patterns always tell the truth. That is why the Stoics paid close attention to habits instead of speeches. Anyone can sound wise. Anyone can quote philosophy. Anyone can pretend to care. Time exposes what performance cannot hide. The most dangerous people are often masters of appearance. They know exactly what others expect to hear. They understand emotion. They recognize sympathy. They become experts at creating second chances while avoiding real responsibility. There is another subtle clue. Notice how they respond when someone else is hurting because of them. Do they become curious? Do they sincerely want to understand the pain they caused? Or do they immediately defend themselves? Do they become angry because someone mentioned the consequences of their behavior? Compassion requires humility. Pride refuses responsibility. An evil person protects their image at almost any cost. A wise person protects their character. Those are not the same thing. One is concerned with appearance. The other is concerned with truth. And truth cannot grow where pride rules the heart. This leads us to the fifth and final sign. The one most people overlook. The one that quietly connects every other sign we've discussed. It is the reason some people leave every relationship, every workplace, and every friendship surrounded by chaos, while somehow convincing themselves they are always innocent. The fifth sign is that an evil person constantly creates division. They divide friends. They divide families. They divide co-workers. They divide communities. Peace threatens them because peace exposes them. Chaos protects them. Imagine dropping a stone into a calm lake. The water eventually becomes still again. Now imagine someone who keeps throwing stones every few seconds. The lake never has a chance to settle. Manipulative people often create emotional turbulence for exactly this reason. Confused people are easier to control. Distracted people ask fewer questions. Divided people cannot unite against manipulation. History has repeated this lesson countless times. Whenever someone seeks power without virtue, they often begin by creating conflict, rumors, half-truths, secrets, favoritism, jealousy, suspicion. Each one becomes another stone thrown into the water. Marcus Aurelius constantly reminded himself that human beings were created to cooperate, like the hands, the feet, and the eyes. To deliberately separate people for personal gain was deeply opposed to Stoic virtue. Think about someone who always seems to carry drama wherever they go. Every workplace eventually becomes toxic. Every friendship ends badly. Every family gathering turns into conflict. Every relationship somehow collapses. At first, you may believe they are simply unlucky. But after enough time, another possibility appears. Perhaps they are not surrounded by chaos. Perhaps they create it. Patterns reveal what isolated events cannot. This is why wisdom requires observation instead of immediate judgment. The Stoic does not rush to label people. The Stoic watches patiently, calmly, objectively. Time reveals everyone. One of the greatest mistakes people make is believing evil always appears dramatic. In reality, it usually appears ordinary. A sarcastic comment, a broken promise, a small lie, a subtle manipulation, a quiet attempt to isolate someone. One decision seems insignificant, but repeated thousands of times, those decisions shape an entire character. Character is never built overnight. Neither is corruption. Both are the result of daily choices. Now ask yourself something even more important. Why does recognizing these signs matter? Is it so we can judge others? No, Stoicism has never been about pointing fingers. It has always pointed inward first, because every sign we've discussed also exists as a warning for ourselves. Have you ever tried to control someone else's emotions? Have you ever secretly envied another person's success? Have you ever refused responsibility for your own actions? Have you ever allowed pride to speak louder than truth? These questions are uncomfortable. That is exactly why they matter. Marcus Aurelius filled his private journal with reminders to correct himself before criticizing anyone else. He understood something timeless. The greatest victory is not exposing evil in another person. It is preventing it from taking root inside yourself. You cannot control who enters your life. You cannot control the choices other people make. You cannot control betrayal. You cannot control deception, but you can control your response. You can strengthen your judgment. You can guard your peace. You can refuse manipulation. You can choose discipline over emotion, wisdom over impulse, character over popularity. That is where real power begins. Imagine standing in the middle of a violent storm. The wind screams around you. Trees bend. Rain crashes to the ground. Yet beneath your feet, the mountain never moves. That mountain is the Stoic mind. Life will always bring difficult people. Some will lie. Some will betray. Some will manipulate. Some will envy. Some will attempt to use your kindness against you. But none of them can steal your character unless you willingly surrender it. Epictetus said that people may chain your body, but they cannot chain your mind unless you allow them to. That truth is just as powerful today as it was 2,000 years ago. Every difficult person you meet presents two choices: become bitter, or become wiser, become fearful, or become stronger, become reactive, or become disciplined. The decision has always belonged to you. Perhaps the most powerful lesson from Stoicism is this: do not waste your life trying to understand why evil people behave the way they do. Spend that energy becoming so grounded in virtue that their behavior no longer has power over your peace. Protect your attention, because where attention goes, your life follows. Protect your standards, because your standards determine your future. Protect your inner world, because everything valuable begins there. And remember this: not everyone who smiles wishes you well. Not everyone who criticizes wishes you harm. Judge people by consistency. Judge them by action. Judge them by the peace or chaos they repeatedly bring into the lives of others. Time is the greatest revealer of character. Patience is the greatest protection against deception. If this message made you see someone, or even yourself, in a new way, don't ignore that feeling. Awareness is the first step toward freedom. The Stoics believed that a single moment of clear perception can change the direction of an entire life. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe for more Stoic wisdom that helps you build mental strength, emotional control, and unshakable inner peace. Like this video, if you believe character matters more than appearances, and share it with someone who needs to hear these lessons today. Remember, the strongest person in the room is rarely the loudest. It is the one who has mastered their own mind. Until next time, protect your peace, guard your character, and keep walking the Stoic path.